watched the clips, and it was really interesting because I saw when your eyes widened in recognition. I saw little smiles crossing your face when you saw something that maybe made you think of something. I saw a nod. I didn't see anyone texting. Those clips reached you in an emotional way. They touched you. They took you back in time, possibly. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, the power that these clips and that the arts have in evoking our feelings and what we can do with the arts to talk about a subject that often is difficult for some people to talk about. So let me share a few facts and figures with you. 30% of the Medicare budget is spent on the last year of life. And that's out of $523 billion spent on healthcare, and of that, that's out of $2.2 trillion that our government spends. What were you thinking? Many people probably were thinking nothing, or that's a big number. But did it invoke in you the same response that those clips just did? So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. The power of those stories to really engage. And I'm not saying that numbers aren't important. They give us a context. But numbers alone don't tell the story. We're story-driven creatures. Our lives are measured in stories. Our past, our present, the futures are all parsed out in the stories that we tell. And when we're robbed of our ability to tell our stories, we're robbed of our humanity, I think. So we'll be speaking about that this afternoon. So we're going to start where I'm going to turn to Dr. Clayton, to Jay, and I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to have a conversation amongst these three panelists in response to the several clips that we'll be showing you. So in this series of clips that you just saw, what struck you about the way that death and dying is portrayed over these past 70 years, from Goodbye, Mr. Chips in 1939 to some of the more recent ones like the last Harry Potter film? What trends are you seeing? Are there any differences? Have we grown in our ability to discuss these things?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't think there's a clear trend over historical period in these movies. There's an incredible range of responses to death and dying, but they all have in common that these are responses created by big studios. These are popular movies in different eras. And two of my students who are here with us today, wonderful students, Caitlin Meyer and Angelica Salisbury, and I picked out these clips. And at first we thought we'd put them in historical order so you'd see a clear progression. But it just wasn't there. You had the child's perspective in Bambi, but then you had it in Lion King as well. You had anger in terms of endearment and improved Gwyneth Paltrow getting so furious at her sister for not being there during the final days. You had sentimentality. You had in Old Yeller, you had the boy facing death like a man. A very, you might say, stereotyped of the age, but also, I think, a fairly ageless phenomenon.
What were your responses, Kathy and Bryan, to the clips?
I found this particular series so, in a way, painfully evocative of making me feel so sad, and I think it's part of why it's so hard for all of us to talk about death in this kind of way, because you see the panic, particularly you see it in Bambi and in Lion King and in Old Yeller, this incredible sort of panic and anxiety and fear and terror of something that would be so profound to think about the loss of a parent, the loss of a dog, and it's so well portrayed. And I think it just frames so well this whole issue of why it's so hard to talk about this, and why it's so hard for we healthcare professionals, we physicians, to have to do this conversation because we can see it and watch it. And in a way, I think these films model it for us in a way that's model the emotional aspects of it. And we doctors are taught to sort of suppress that emotional aspect and deal with the cognitive issues. So I think this series is just so useful because it so focuses on this sort of emotional content issue.
And I think that's a really interesting point when you talk about sadness, because we didn't see, and we might see in some clips later, some alternative emotions, but that's really kind of the framing emotion in many Hollywood films, that it's something sad, it's something you grieve about, which of course we all do, but there are, as you're suggesting, other ways to feel. There are many ways.
Many ways to feel. Yeah, but this is profound grief, profound sense of loss.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and when I'm watching especially the Bambi, every time I see a deer in one of her children's books, I say that's Bambi, and she now calls all deers Bambi, but she doesn't know quite yet what that significance is. And I caught myself doing that, and I thought, boy, that's strange. But I think the most revolutionary of those clips was that particular one, because it frames this central question that we all face, and is probably the most painful for us to face, and we're most inhibited by, which is how do we talk about this with children? And how do we explain it to children in a way they'll understand? And how do we develop a vocabulary for talking about this with each other? And one of the things that I think these films illustrate, and the arts in general illustrate, is the way that a short clip can convey the spirit of something that no amount of figures or journalistic approaches or lectures could ever touch. In a few seconds of Bambi, we have the spirit of the loss of that young child and the realization of the experience, the truth of death. And I think that's what the arts are uniquely positioned to do, to convey the spirit of something that in some ways is ineffable. But we also live in a culture that is just so profoundly afraid of talking about these issues, that these films give us permission. And I think that's the other role that the arts play, to give permission to speak the unspeakable, to say the thing that we cannot say, to convey it to one another, and talk about it maybe in terms of metaphors or animation or animals or in abstractions when we can't talk about it directly.
How many of you remember the first time you saw Bambi and how traumatic it was? Disney really was onto something. He killed a lot of mothers in Dumbo, Bambi, and that's so primal,
Right.
Our fear of losing our parent. What is your sense of, we were talking earlier about how Disney sort of changed their mode a bit.
Yes, well, it's my personal feeling that the Lion King kills the father, and it's a kind of expiation for all those mothers that Walt Disney killed off earlier in their cinema career. But I loved your comment about permission to feel around these issues, because I think that the very sentimentality of so many of these clips, these are not all profound movies, but they have power nonetheless.
Extraordinary power.
And it's that power, even sometimes the power of the sentimental, that allows us to think and talk about what we're feeling.
And if we cry when we see those, especially when we were kids when we saw Bambi, it is healing in a way. It's getting out that emotion that I think we carry culturally that is sometimes a burden because we don't know how to deal with that emotion and those fears, which we'll be talking about. And these films are outlets for that. Certainly it was, and everybody raised their hand because they all remember Bambi. So there is something about stories that connect us in a way all together. We all have had that experience.
Now, this incredible universality to witness this grief and loss, and then to reflect upon it, and in a way give you permission to talk about these issues.
Yeah, and I love how an actress like Deborah Winger, through a portrayal like that, so iconic, so remembered, can make a bold choice and convey the truth of something that that we all can recognize as truthful. And it's not just the storytellers, the directors. It's it's the people who, as we were talking about, bring something of themselves to these roles and bring a truth to the experience. The animator, I'm sure, of Bambi brought a truth to that experience.
What was in Snow? It's just all so well done. Music and all of the elements together that we respond to. Well, we're going to move on to some clips now in the arena that I work in, which is television, and we're going to see some interesting clips from the past and the recent past as well.